1985 was a monster year for you. You also were one of the headliners for the song We Are the World. What was Michael Jackson like? Do you have any stories from that experience?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I got plenty of stories, some of which I can even tell. Um, yeah, Michael was great. We were right next to each other, and we did the lead parts, and so we conferred a little bit. It was no no big stories, but he knew what was going on. When they did the pass of the lead vocals, they start with Lionel. There comes a time when we hear a certain call, but then when we come together as one. Stevie, there are people dying, and then on down. Stevie would mess it up almost deliberately, and then they'd start again, and then they get all the way to Al Jarreau, and he'd start again. So they must have done that like 3 or 4 or 5 times, and I'm way over here on the end, and I haven't got to rehearse my line once. And by the way, I only got my line because Prince didn't show up, and so I thought we were done when we did the chorus, and I'm just in the lounge, and I feel the tap of my shoulder, and I turn around, and and they say, "Hey, Quincy wants to see you." Oh, so I go in to see Quincy. Quincy says, "Smelly, come over here." He called Michael Jackson Smelly because he was so clean. He said, "Sing the line for Huey," and he sings the line, and I sing it back, and Quincy goes, "You got it." And so now there I am in my lineup, and we're cutting it, and I've never even sung it yet with the music, right? And they're going through it 3 and 4 and 5 times and never getting to Michael or me yet because somebody's screwing up. So meanwhile, Stevie Wonder's had about 4 or 5 shots at his line, and he doesn't need the practice. So I said, and Humberto Gatica, our engineer, Quincy's engineer, comes out to move some microphones at some point, and I said, "Hey, Humberto, when somebody screws up, can you just play it through so we can at least rehearse our lines?" And he's, "Oh, okay, sure." And then he goes in, and Michael says, "That's a good idea." But Michael, he didn't miss a trick. He knew just what was going on.
There's obviously a powerful cast of musicians there. Who do you think sang it the best?
No, it was amazing. I mean, you don't get to meet those people in a lifetime, let alone work with them in one day. I was 29 or 30 years old, and I knew then that this would be the career event of my life. And 40 years later, it was amazing.
Was anybody, when they were singing it live, that you heard, they stood out amongst all those amazing singers, or everybody was just very good?
The thing I most remember is that after all the choruses were done, and we're going to do the solo parts, the solo singers, all of us, we gathered around the piano because that's what one does. You get around the piano and sing it around the piano first, then you go to the microphones and do it for real. But you rehearse it with just the piano. And so all of us singers got around the piano, and Stevie Wonder was playing the piano. And I was on the side of the piano where I could see, almost looking directly at Stevie. And then he started the run through. And first Lionel, there comes a time when we did, and then him, and then Kenny Rogers, I guess, or is it Paul Simon, I guess, and then Kenny Rogers, and you could see as each singer, first of all, you could hear what it was going to sound like with all these different personalities. And I mean, and every one of them was a star, right? And I remember Stevie was playing like this, and as everybody, as each new voice would come out, it would register on his face. And finally, after about the 3rd or 4th, 5th singer down the line, he goes, "Oh my gosh, so many stars. But that first run through, when we all sang acoustically around the piano, was hair stand up time, man. It was just unbelievable.
Bring us inside one mission, 1 minute when you weren't sure you were going to make it out, and what turned the tide?
Well, we had one mission where in November of 1968, we had lost several teams, and they really wanted to get a team into a target in Laos. So in the morning, we would go into a primary target, get shot out by the enemy, go to the secondary, and then to the alternate. And that happened like 2 or 3 days in a row. In the morning, get shot out of 3 targets, go back, have lunch, get in the helicopters, go back, get shot out. This happened a couple of times. And then on the 3rd day, in the afternoon, it was cloudy, but we got inserted into a target. And I got the team online. We moved up the hill. We came across a huge trail, crossed it. We put in a wiretap, and we had an ambush set up so that, and the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, didn't know we were there. So we set up the ambush, and they're taking pictures of the NVA going down the trail. They had the weapons on their shoulders. It was a perfect mission. But we're in triple canopy jungle. So triple canopy could be anywhere from 100 to 150 feet above us. You really don't know what the weather's like. So later, our Fort air controller, codenamed Cubby, came back, and it was my old team leader who was the Cubby writer. I gave him the code. We can have a POW. I'll capture him. I'll meet you back at the LZ in 1 hour. He goes, no, stop, do nothing. Don't fart, don't do anything. I'm at 10,000 feet. I can't see the mountain you're on, let alone get you a helicopter in to pick you up. Right about that time, the enemy activity on the trail got more active. We could hear tanks starting up above us. So make a long story short, we pulled in the ambush. We moved deep into the night. They came after us with dogs, dozens of dogs and hundreds of men with lanterns that all are coming up the mountain looking for us. And we got into a little creek, went up the creek at night, finally set up our rest overnight spot, and I was facing that creek. Well, that night, around after midnight, 2 NVA soldiers, one with a lantern, went past us. They ran out of fuel. They turned around and came back. When they came back, my interpreter coughed, and one of the NVA came up and touched my boot. He just crawled up the mountain, that little creek side there. I'm sitting there with my car 15 going, I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but anyways, he touched my boot. I could hear him catch his breath. And he turned around. He only moved when the wind blew. So he went back down the hill, and the next morning, we moved out. And so in answer to your question, the afternoon, after we had climbed that mountain all day, we took a quick break because our point man came into contact. He visually saw Laotian woodcutters, but they had no weapons. And when they saw us, they didn't take any hostile action. We took a quick break, but we had to get to the top of that mountain. We were all worn out because we had been hiking up that mountain all day. So it's around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We went to stand up, and I was really tired. All I wanted to do was lie down and take a nap. I went to stand up. My foot slipped. I fell, landed on my face, tried to get up again, landed again on my face, and I was just lying there going, all I want to do is to turn over and have a nap. But I knew if I did that, that would be the wrong thing. And my whole team was looking at me. So I was the team leader then for Spike Team Idaho. That moment in time was one where I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. We knew they couldn't come get us with the helicopters. And Spider Parks told us, get to the mountain, set up a security, and stay there until the weather breaks. Because if you make enemy contact, we can't come and get you. You'll be on your own. So finally stood up without falling down. We got to the top of the mountain, but that was one of those moments in time where I really wasn't certain. So we went up to the top of the mountain, set up our perimeter for the night, and during the next day we did security patrol. Our Vietnamese would go out, and then we also had an odd situation where at night, another mountain or two away, because we're on a mountaintop now, we could see a side of a mountain just light up with huge lights, like in the middle of the Laotian jungle. And I'm on the radio, I could hear the Russians talking, and the Russians flew in with an aerial resupply to the North Vietnamese army. So I'm trying to get TAC Air to come shoot down the Russians. Of course, it didn't happen, but that was one of those missions. It's a long answer to a short question, sir.
When they touched your boot, how did you restrain yourself from? I feel like I would have panicked. I guess I'm not a Green Beret, but I feel like I would have shot him just out of fear.
Well, remember, we're in the jungle. The people that were looking for us, only two people knew where we were, and we were so far up the mountain. I knew that for him to get back without a lantern, to tell his command people that by the time he got back, we would be heading out up the mountain. And if they came for us, we would have top of the mountaintop with claymore mines, etc., where we could defend ourselves. And we hit our trail. Whenever we would move in the jungle, the tail gunner would always cover our tracks so that anybody who's trying to find us, they couldn't. And when we left, anything that came into our perimeter where we had stayed that night, we put down powdered mace and black pepper. So the dogs hit it with their noses would not be effective in tracking us in the next day. So if we had fired around, then all their compadres down the hill, their fellow communists, would know where we were. So the option was, I kept the gun on him, and he quietly moved down the mountain. He only moved when the wind blew. They left at first light, man. We packed up and we hit the road heading up that mountain. So just one of those moments, it's kind of like, well, if he moved quickly, it would have been a different story, but he didn't. He was cool and calm in his own way.
Neal McDonough, you've long been known as the quintessential bad guy, but in The Last Rodeo, which you wrote and starred in, you finally get to play the good guy. It's out in theaters now, and I have to say, I cried through the last 15 minutes. It's a powerful, moving film. My wife Alyssa loved it too, and what a full circle moment after being blackballed for 2 years because you refused to kiss your co-star, losing your home and your cars. Here you are, kissing your co-star at the end of a movie you made. The one thing you never lost through it all was your family and your faith. That makes this moment even more powerful.
Yeah, that pretty much encapsulates my life of the last 10, 12 years. It was, it was very difficult, that's for sure, to go through what I went through. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. But, as soon as I got through, and it was something that was hard to get through. And, that's when I had a big drinking problem, because I thought drinking might be the only way to just kind of drown my sorrows and kind of, get away from the world. And because no one understood me, I felt no one, could kind of grasp what I was all about and who I was. And I thought that Hollywood just completely turned on me and never wanted to invite me back to the dance again. So it was for something that I'd studied and worked on for so hard through Syracuse, where I went to Syracuse with you, to London Academy, to all the stage and all the movies and TV shows I'd done up to that point, all the hard work that I'd put in. When it all got taken away, it's never easy. Tim, you know full well what it's like to have things taken away from you and the struggles that ensue because of it. But once you dig down deep and you figure out who you really are, and we're here for a finite amount of time on this planet. So while we're here, our job is to work for him. Our job is to keep through the struggles, to stay positive, and know that the end is something that is glorious if we do it correctly. And at that point, when I stopped drinking and everything, like kind of the clouds parted and everything just kind of opened up because of my wife, Reve, and the amazing relationship that I have, same relationship that you have with Alyssa. It's the same thing, that once you see the clarity and see what your job is from him, everything becomes much clearer and much more linear in your approach to everything. You don't need certain things. You don't do certain things. Your nose is just straight forward, staring straight at what your goal is. And my goal is to entertain people for him, to give people a chance to see movies that do give glory to him. They can be entertaining. They can be edgy. They can be action-packed. It can be everything you want instead of just the usual saccharine, sweet, smaller Christian films. We're trying to make And those were great, don't get me wrong, but I'm trying to make films that the whole family can go, no matter if you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or Taoist, doesn't matter. That you go to a movie and feel like you feel a little bit better thereafter. But that time that I went through is what built me to who I am today. If I hadn't gone through that, would I have the success of The Last Rodeo or Homestead or The Shift, these films that Angel Studios and myself and my wife Reve have been working on together? I don't think so. I think sometimes you need to be crucified in life to realize what life is really about. It's about family. It's about God. It's about what you can do to make the world a better place while you're here for that finite amount of time.
Neal, can you go in a little more detail for people that maybe haven't heard the story or don't know about kind of what got you blackballed?
Yeah, it was, I'd always had in my contracts that I wouldn't kiss another woman on screen. And my wife didn't have any problem with it. It was me really who had a problem with it. I was like, yeah, I don't want to put you through it. I know we're going to start having kids and I don't want to put my kids through it. So I decided that I was going to be the villain du jour and be the best villain on the planet. And I think I kind of achieved that, to an extent of all the films. I can't tell. I was sitting in the makeup chair about a year ago and I was getting ready for another death scene, as I always do. And the makeup artist said, guess how many death scenes you've been in? I tallied them up last night. I'm like, oh, I don't know, 25? And she says, no, this is your 63rd. I'm like, that's got to be some kind of record because they're not like small little background extra deaths. They're always these big villain, bad guy deaths, which I'm very, very proud of. And a lot of people say, well, you kill thousands of people in all of your movies, sometimes millions, and you won't kiss another woman on screen. I'm like, yeah, but you're not really killing anybody, and it's kind of funny on the day when we're doing it. But intimacy is a whole different thing for me. So when I wouldn't do it, and they couldn't understand it, Hollywood just completely turned on me, and they wouldn't let me be part of the show anymore. And for 2 years, I couldn't get a job, and I lost everything you could possibly imagine. Not just houses and material things, but your swagger, your cool, who you are, your identity, everything. My identity was an actor, and a really good one. And once you don't have that identity, you're kind of lost in a tailspin. And I was in a big, ugly tailspin for a couple of years. And it still took me a couple of years thereafter to kind of break the habit of, am I really in the show, or is this just kind of a part-time thing? They kind of letting me back in. I'm not so sure. And I drink more. I never drink during the set, never drink during work, because I love my craft. I love my craft so stinking much. And I take it with the utmost seriousness in everything that I do. But after work or days off or anything, I'd still feel like I wasn't a man. I didn't feel like that I was doing the right things, or something was just wasn't clicking. And then it was finally Reve saying, you need to go back to church. You need to, because I used to go to church daily, and I kind of would go to church on Sundays, and I'd probably half in the wrapper when I go to church on Sundays, and just kind of get through stuff. But then when I stopped drinking, and everything just kind of changed, literally the clouds parted. I was like, oh, I don't need this crutch. Oh, people are calling me. Oh, I am successful. Oh, I do like myself again. Okay. I am God's child and I have a job to do. Stop wallowing in self-pity, dust yourself off and go hit it hard. And ever since that day, I've hit it as hard as possible. And, at 59 years old, I'm more busy than I've ever been in my whole life, because I have this clarity, I have a goal, and I have a vision. I have one boss, and it's God, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make my boss happy.
Why did you refuse to kiss your co-star? And what made it okay for you to break your own rule after all these years?
Well, my wife is really hot. That's the other thing. She's a good-looking woman, and everything else pales compared to my wife Reve. So, but in seriousness, it was just it was just something I was never comfortable doing. And so when I wrote The Last Rodeo, I wrote 3 flashback scenes for my deceased wife, and in one of the scenes, 2 of the scenes, I have to kiss my wife. So I convinced my wife Reve, I'm not doing this movie. And it was financed, it was ready to go, and director's set. And I said, I'm not doing the movie unless you play my wife, because I'm not going to kiss some other woman on screen. And she's like, well, I'm not an actor. I'm like, well, you are now. So let's go. And she was a supermodel. She'd been on stages. She knows the pressure of the spotlight and all that stuff. So when it came, when it was game day, she was so prepared and so ready, and she crushed it. She was so great in the movie, and to kiss my wife, my real life wife, in a movie that I wrote and produced and gave glory to him in, I can't imagine, Tim, anything really better than that in my life when it comes to my career, because it's finally one of those things where, all right, I made it and I did it our way. We did it and we made a beautiful film that's made money, that everyone's loving, that the reviews are crazy for. I've never been part of a film that has a 95% Rotten Tomatoes approval rating from the audience. Never. So we knew we did something right. And, to walk down the street or go through airports and have people come up to me in tears about the last rodeo is just something that I'm so stinking proud of. And it's hard to put into words how fortunate I feel about my life at this point. And again, you got to go over some speed bumps. You got to get crucified. You got to do certain things to really find the glory at the end of the tunnel. And I think I've gotten there.
Not to keep going back, and it was a dark time for you, but you're on set. They say, "Hey, now we're going to do this scene where you're going to, kiss the co-star," and you just said, "No, it's in my contract." I'm sure they tried to pressure you, and you just stuck to your guns. I mean, did you ever even consider folding at that point?
No. I remember they came to my trailer, and the wardrobe lady says, "Would you like to be wearing a sock?" Excuse me. "Would you like to be wearing a sock for the scene?" I'm like, "A sock?" And I said to her, I remember, I said, "I'm from Cape Cod, and I don't wear socks. I've never worn socks. I'm a loafer and no socks guy." And she's like, "What?" And she closed the door and she walks away. I'm like, that was the oddest question I've ever had in my life. And then 5 minutes later, boom, 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 on my trailer door, there's the producers. And it's like, "You don't understand. We need you to do a simulated sex scene today, and you're just gonna have a sock on. You'd be naked." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so then I pressed them more. I'm like, "That's not what I'm comfortable doing. So why are you pressing me?" And she goes, "We need it for ratings." I'm like, "We're shooting a pilot. The show hasn't even out yet. What do you mean ratings? What are you talking about? I'm an actor. I'm not that guy." And they said, "Well, unless you do it, we're going to have to replace you." I'm like, "Well, then replace me, because I'm not going to do it." And they fired me. And I remember flying home from Albuquerque and flying over the desert in New Mexico and realizing, okay, I just got fired from a TV show. I'd have a better chance of surviving in that desert than surviving when I land in Hollywood. And I was right. And I didn't tell Reve. We're on a hike with two of our little kids at the time, and my lawyer calls me and said, "Okay, so they're suing you. Um, you're This is not a good thing for you, Neal. You sure you don't want to go back and think about it again?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to think about it again. You know me." He goes, "Well, I figured that. So just know that this is going to be a very painful, costly ordeal, because my agent left it out of the contract." So it was just this awful, ugly time, and it cost me a lot. And would I do it again? You're darn right I would. Would I like to go through that pain again? No, I wouldn't. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. No. But if I had to, I would, because I knew I did the right thing for my marriage. I knew I did the right thing for him, and I knew I did the right thing for me. Really, deep down inside, in my gut, I knew I did the right thing. So sometimes pain is the right thing to go through, to make sure that, look, Tim, going through pain, going through adverse things, going through difficult situations in your life, everyone goes through it. Everyone. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter if you're a plumber or if you're an astronaut. You're going to go through some very difficult things in your life. That's what life is about. But really, what the struggle of life is truly about is how you dust yourself up and conduct yourself thereafter. That really tells you what kind of man you really are, or woman you really are, what kind of husband you are, what kind of dad you are, what kind of coworker you are. And I want to be one of those guys that stood tall, did the right thing, and was an example for other people, that if you do the right thing, you might get, kicked to the curb a few times, but you're going to do it the correct way. And at the end, you'll be smiling all the way. And that's where I am at this point.
So my senior year, I was on a mission. We're going to win the state championship. Then I get hurt and we lose. I was in a funk. I laid in bed, I'm not going to lie, for like a week. I was so distraught because I wanted to bring that recognition to my high school. So I have no idea why I was taking Spanish. I have zero idea to this day why a black man in Alabama was taking Spanish in 1981. I have no idea why. So So I caught up in all my other classes except Spanish. And then I didn't graduate. I talked about this on the 60 Minutes thing. I was devastated that I never got to march. So when I was doing the 60-minute piece that aired last year, I took the guy, he says, let's go with where you stood that night. So I stood next door on on the on the baseball stadium on the top shelf level, and I watched all my friends graduate. We only had like a little over 100 and some. It took like a couple hours, but I cried the entire time. And it was brutal. And my dad had flown in from California. Instead of him embracing me because I was traumatized, he just yelled at me. But he flew all the way from California. That was my first night. Like, I'm done with you, dude. I'm done with you. So I cried for 2 hours. And then, to be honest with you, I became a real jerk, a real asshole, Troy and Tim. So I go to summer school. I get to college. I'm a total jerk. I'm playing basketball angry. I'm hating my dad even more when I'm playing basketball. I'm trying to stick it to him. I'm trying to stick it to Miss Gomez for flunking me for Spanish. I'm trying to stick it to every person who laughed at me when I didn't graduate. And I was just a mean, angry dude on the basketball court. And then one night, um, I had a spin incident in New Jersey. And I got in trouble, rightfully so. And I was sitting in that hotel room crying. And I was like, yo, man, what is wrong with you? What is your problem? Why are you mad at Miss Gomez? You flunked Spanish. Why are you mad at her? Why are you mad at your dad? Your dad's a jerk. Why are you carrying that baggage around? You know, those kids are 16, 17. They do dumb stuff. They made fun of you because you didn't graduate. You didn't get to throw your hat in the air and jump up and down. And then, because we were playing, I forget where we were playing. So I got suspended. I forget where we were playing. I was sitting in that hotel because you can't go to the game when you're suspended. I was sitting in that hotel room and I was like, yo, man, why don't you just play basketball because you're good at it? It's not Miss Gomez's fault. It's not your dad's fault. It's not those other idiots you grew up with. They made fun of you because when you're young and stupid, you make fun of people's flaws because you're young and stupid. But that was actually the turning point in my life because I was sitting in that room crying like a baby because number one, you know, when you do something stupid publicly, you're an idiot and everybody's making fun. And then you give people the right to give their opinion on you, but also you let your teammates down. But that actually turned into one of that was my come to Jesus moment about, yo, man, just play basketball because you're good at it. And from that point on, I just stop being a jerk, play hard, play aggressive, forget about Miss Gomez. And I had to apologize to Miss Gomez, like, hey, I've been angry at you all these years or some stupid I did. You know, so that was a really good turning point. And that, you know, so Tim, that answer your point. I tell kids, man, ain't none of us perfect. We're all gonna make mistakes, but you have to acknowledge your fault in the mistake. And that's a lot of people are afraid to look at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? That was actually my fault. It was my fault I flunked Spanish. It wasn't Miss Gomez. That was a great turning point for me.
Aron, on this show, we wrestle with big questions of faith and fairness. How do you reconcile the enhanced game's anything goes philosophy with the timeless notion that competition should be a level playing field?
Well, Tim, that's a great question. I think that you could have multiple level playing fields. So from 1896 until 1992, only amateur athletes were allowed to compete at the Olympic Games. However, there were many other parallel sports competitions that were for professional athletes. The Olympics core credo is about the amateur nature of sport and how that professional sport violates the integrity of sport. It's ungentlemanly, it's sinful, etc. And so the enhanced games are not anything goes. There's a very comprehensive rule set, scientific and medical guidelines, and it's a level playing field, but it's a different playing field from natural sports. And just as Paralympic competition is different from Olympic competition, enhanced games is very different from Olympic competition. There can be multiple avenues of competition going on simultaneously. However, to reconcile that with the economics of modern sport is the challenge, I think in particular for the Olympics. And I always say that no one is interested in watching F2. Everyone watches F1. No one watches minor league baseball. Everyone watches Major League Baseball. Why? Because we're only interested in seeing the very best of human competition. And enhanced athletes will just be faster, stronger, have longer career longevity. And so ultimately, I think we're going to win because we produce just a objectively better entertainment product.
I've always said that with the Olympics, it's like every event, if you're watching the best of the best of the best compete, everyone seems, relatively speaking, normal on TV. Like when you see Usain Bolt winning, obviously he's the fastest man, or at the time, the fastest man on the planet, but he's only winning by, split seconds compared to, I always say, like, you got to have one normal, just like an average Joe, run in the event, like make a lane next to him, or show like an average Joe time compared to, it's like with the enhanced games, how much do you think, like the sprinter, or pick any event you want, like what do you think the real difference is going to be between the Olympics and the enhanced games in terms of, is it going to be noticeable enough of a difference for the entertainment value that you're talking about?
Well, I think the evidence is that 44% of elite athletes admit to using banned performance-enhancing substances, according to research funded and commissioned by the International Olympic Committee. And so what we are comparing against is not a truly natural athlete with an enhanced athlete. It's sort of a hidden enhanced athlete against an openly enhanced athlete. And the real difference will be minor. We're talking maybe 1 or 2%. However, that's a new threshold of human performance. But what I would point to is that we've already broken our first world record. Christian Golomev of Greece, in an exhibition event earlier this year, broke the 50 freestyle world record in swimming, the most important record in swimming. But he was 31 years old when he did that, 10 years older than you would ever expect a swimmer to break a world record. And so I believe the greatest gift that we will give to our society is not a 21-year-old running faster than Usain Bolt, but a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, and maybe one day a 65-year-old. Because ultimately we are in the business of cultural change. We have a life in 3 acts: 0 to 18, childhood; 18 to 65, adulthood; 65 onwards, senior citizens. 18 makes sense. It's the age of sexual maturity. But 65 is purely arbitrary. It was actually, if you understand the history, picked by Napoleon as a way to cheat his soldiers out of a pay rise, where they traded it for a pension. It's actually a fascinating history. And so if a 65-year-old can run faster than Usain Bolt, should we all be retiring at 65? Or will we conceive of a world where we can actually be faster and stronger and younger for longer?
When you announced the enhanced games in 2023, people called it a stunt. Now you've got Olympians on the roster. What are you hearing behind the scenes from these athletes?
When I started the enhanced games in 2023, the world decried it as a joke. I actually have a cover from the Spectator magazine, the old establishment magazine here in London, that said that the enhanced games couldn't happen. And they went on this long diatribe about why our idea would fail. And ultimately, we've proven them all wrong. They said we couldn't raise money, we couldn't sign athletes, we couldn't get a host city. But we've done all of those things and so much more. And I always like to say the Olympics are the ultimate avenue of human competition. But the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has never had competition of its own. And so we have been able to create a competitor, and we have them running scared. But what I would point to is that every legacy incumbent thinks of the disruptor as a joke. The taxi cabs thought Uber was a joke. Blockbuster Video famously had the opportunity to purchase Netflix, but they considered it a joke, right? When you are a multi-billion dollar global conglomerate with your giant headquarters and your limousines and private jets, you feel indestructible. But we know throughout history that institutions do not last very long. Sears was the biggest company in the world. They built the world's tallest building, and now it doesn't even exist. Blockbuster, Netflix, we can go on and on. And the Olympics may be one of the most durable monopolies in history, but we're giving them a run for the money. And when 44% of athletes are cheating and taking banned performance-enhancing substances and only 1% are getting caught, we're bringing honesty and transparency to the system.
Your Hall of Fame speech wasn't really about football. It was about pain, purpose, and forgiveness, especially forgiving your father. What made you decide to share that publicly?
Well, what made me share it publicly is because I think that forgiveness is something that human beings as a whole struggle with. And I had a firsthand front row seat on a woman who had every right to be as bitter and unforgiving and resentful as possible because my father was, number one, he was extremely abusive, physically abusive to my mother. My mother would go to work sometimes with a black eye and have to wear sunglasses or would, have to wear long sleeve shirts in the summer because her arms were bruised. I remember my father taking a cigarette and holding her locked in the bathroom and threatening to burn her hair, set her hair on fire with a cigarette. And then when she wasn't sane or whatever he wanted her to say, he would take the cigarette and put cigarette burns on her legs that she still has to this day. And, I would kind of watch and hear all this stuff happening. And so my father, he was also strung out on drugs. And as a result of all of the drugs and alcohol, I think it affected him mentally. And so he struggled with mental illness also. And it got to the point to where I was a teenager and I decided that I didn't want to have that anger or bitterness that I saw in my mother. My mother was one of the most bitter people that you'll ever meet. And I remember telling my mother one day, Mom, I'm being very honest with you. I only know that you love me because you're my mother. I don't know that you know how to show love because of all the stuff that you've been through. But I know and I trust that you love me. And, I used to get a lot of beatings when I was younger. And for my mother, that was the only way she knew to discipline me. And she just had in her mind that she had to be extremely hard on me because of the environment that I was growing up in. So the reason why I'm so grateful for that, and I got beaten so much, man, and literally I just came from Pittsburgh a few days ago because it was my mother's birthday. And this is what, 40 some years later, my mother still, Kurt, I just want to apologize to you again because I didn't have to beat you like that when you were a kid. She literally just said that to me about 3 or 4 days ago. But that was her way of keeping me disciplined because there were so many kids in that environment that didn't listen to their parents that ended up dead or ended up in jail. So her putting fear in me was the way she made sure that I would always listen and respect her. So I thank her for that today. So my father had, not even after he left when I was 5 years old, he just turned to a life of drugs. It wasn't really in my life. My mother became even more bitter because he never really did anything for me. My mother said, in your entire life, your dad got a check from Social Security for $9,000 and he gave you 50. And he gave me $50 for you. She said, and that was the only thing your father has ever done for you since he left. And so she was this angry, bitter woman. And one day we see my father, and this is after I'm in the NFL. This is 22 years later after he left. I was 27 years old. And we see him at the bus stop. And I say to my mother, there go my father right there, Mom. And she said, yeah, and? And I said, well, I mean, I'm sure he's catching the bus to go home, and we're going in that direction. We're going to ride right by his house. Why don't you ask him if you need a ride? And she just starts cursing me out. I'm not effing picking that mother effer up for all he did. He's not sitting in my car. She just goes off on me. And I said to her, well, Mom, how long are you going to hold this against him? I said, look at that man. He's not thinking, he doesn't care one bit about what you just said. He's not even worried about any of that. He looks like he doesn't have a care in the world. And you're sitting over here so bitter. Like, are you going to stay like this all of your life? I said, Mom, I've never spoken to you in a disrespectful way. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm just being honest with you. I believe that you have cheated me out of what a son would receive from his mother as love simply because you've been so bitter, and you've been so bitter because of that man right over there. And it seems like she just didn't even know how to react to it. And she just said, well, ask him if he need a ride, And so I rolled down the window and I said, hey, Dad, you need a ride? And he said, sure. So I wanted to make my mother sit right next to him. So I got out of the front seat. I got into the back seat. And now this is the first time that they've sat side to side since I was 5 years old. And they ended up having a really good conversation. And he said, I'm just so sorry for the way I was. And I was out of my mind. I was strung out on drugs. He said, my mother's name is Rochelle. He said, Rochelle, I was one of the biggest drug addicts I know, and I know a lot of them, And so when we dropped him off at his house, he walked up these steps and he looked back down and waved, and my mother waved by, and she had a smile on her face. And I got out of the back seat and got in the front seat. And as soon as we pulled off, she burst out in tears. And I said, what's wrong? Because you hardly ever see my mother cry. And she said, you know what, Kurt? I just feel like I just dropped off a whole big bag of bricks that's been weighing me down since your father left. And I forgive him. And the change that I saw in her life from that moment to where she is now, totally different trajectory. And she is so much more of a loving person. I saw how once she released all of that unforgiveness and bitterness that she had, the difference that it made in her life. There's this, I think it was Harvard or Yale, it was one of them, and they did this study on bitterness. And what they were trying to figure out is exactly why do people become bitter? And so they studied, I can't remember, it was like 600 people for something like 18 years or something to figure out why people become bitter. And the conclusion was that people don't become bitter because of what they experience in life, but they become bitter because of how they remember what they experienced in life. And so I find that when I was able to change my mother's memory of my father leaving us, that's what helped her forgive him, because I told her, I said, Mom, imagine the man that I wouldn't be if he was there all that time. And that little shift of perspective, I think, is what enabled her to forgive him.
How did Cinderella change after the tragedy, and what does it mean to sing it now?
I almost didn't sing that one anymore. In fact, the first time I stood on stage after we lost our daughter, Maria, I thought I won't sing that song tonight, and I won't sing it. I did decide to go back on stage. I did finally get peace that, yeah, I do need to go sing these songs. I need to sing all these songs that I've written and the new ones that may come out of this. I do have peace that I'm supposed to go do that. But that song, Cinderella, which was written, inspired by Maria and Stevie Joy, my two youngest daughters. One night I wrote it after they wanted me to dance with them, and it was late, and I told them just put their pajamas on. We're not dancing tonight. We're not going to the ball. We're not going to Cinderella ball or any of that. Take off your your cute Disney princess costumes and put on your pajamas and let's go to bed. And they were wanting to dance with their dad, and I felt very bad after I sat down and got them in bed and thought, man, I just blew it. I missed a moment. I could have danced with my girls, take 5 minutes. And instead I was just grumpy and tired and, irritable. And so that's why I wrote the song Cinderella. So the idea that I would sing that song, I mean, I wrote it a year and a half before Maria passed away. And so I thought, gosh, that would just be too hard, not only for me, but for people listening to it. It's like, man, that is so sad, because the song says, the chorus says, I will dance with Cinderella while she is here in my arms, because all too soon the clock will strike midnight and she'll be gone. And I thought, man, I didn't have any idea when I wrote that song that the clock was going to strike midnight a lot sooner, in a way that I never would have imagined. And she's going to be gone for the duration of this life on earth. That's just too hard. That's too sad. And I was on stage the first night back on stage after Maria passed away, and I was doing my set, and I got to the point where I would normally sing Cinderella, and I thought, you know what? I got to sing this song, but I'm going to sing it different tonight, because I wrote it because I missed a moment with my daughter that night, and I wanted to remember that, don't screw this up again. Don't keep missing these moments. And that's why I wrote the song. But that night on stage, I realized that, if I believe what I've been singing all these years, and what I'm holding on to right now that gets me through the next breath and the next day, it is a belief that if what God has promised is true, he's going to wipe every tear from our eyes. And the reason we love fairy tales, or the reason we love the story of Cinderella or any of those, just as human beings, is because there's something inside of us that says there is a happy ever after that's for real, not just a fairy tale. And it's coming, but we're just not going to see it this side of heaven. But can we keep believing that the happy ever after is called heaven? That's what Jesus made a way for us to know and have. And so I'm like, I'm going to sing this song believing that, and let this song come from that place now. It was an earthly sort of song up to that point, like just show up and be a good dad. But now it's a song more about, it's about that still, because I'm still here. I'm still on this planet, still trying to love my wife and, my kids. But it's even bigger now, because when I sing this, I'm singing it believing that I am going to dance with my daughter again. So I got to the end of the song, and at the very end, the last line of the song says, the clock will strike midnight and she'll be gone. And instead that night I just sang, and the clock will strike midnight. And I stopped, and I thought, I didn't plan it. I didn't prepare ahead, because it's probably one of the worst crafted lyrics I've ever done. It doesn't really even rhyme, but I just said, but the truth is, it's all too soon the clock will strike midnight. But the truth is, the dance will go on. And I thought, well, that's it. The dance doesn't end. And the fact of the matter is, I will dance again with my daughter. And so it became probably not probably, for sure, an even more important song for me at that point.
All right, no more talk about season 4. I don't know when you met Suzanne, but I've heard you both say God brought the two of you together. Now, you both grew up in the Catholic Church, and you went to a Catholic high school, so your religious foundation is based around Jesus Christ. I'm asking because I had a religious epiphany. Unfortunately, mine wasn't as happy as your circumstances. Mine was a result of my diagnosis of ALS. I was broken when I received the news. And then, after I stopped feeling sorry for myself because I was not living my best life as God meant me to live. Now, my question for you is, what exactly happened when you met Suzanne? Did you never lose your Christ-centric religion, or was it a more agnostic discovery of God being in your life? Now, just so you know, I ask this without judgment, because Jesus himself said, "Judge not lest ye be judged."
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't mind talking about any of this stuff at all. Um, so I was raised Catholic, and um, the church lost me by the time I was a teenager, because I think, like it is for a lot of young people, is they observe the hypocrisy in the adults around them. And it can seem like the mechanism of organized religion is a way for them to absolve their hypocrisy. And various things that continue in the church today make it very hard for me to relate to or support the church. But I always had a sense of God. Even as a child, even in the face of some really terrible things, I had a sense of God, and it was almost like I probably fit most comfortably into what used to be called Christian mysticism. I experienced life the way I did as a child, which is almost as a mystical experience, and everything is charged with meaning and with power. And that said, I got very far away from any kind of worship and prayer. And for me, I found a personal bottom in 2017, 2018, 2019. Those were very bad times for me. And I found myself turning back. Not turning back. I found myself re-encountering Christ and certain energies for the first time. Like I was meditating a great deal, and I would start to see these visions of the Blessed Mother in my meditations. And I mean, look, I could talk about this for 3 hours. A doctor I was seeing at the time, I said, I keep seeing the Virgin Mary when I meditate. And he goes, well, what's she doing? He goes, she's just looking at me with like such love and compassion, like nobody's ever looked at me. And he says, well, have you talked to her? And I said, no. And he said, well, why don't you ask her something next time you see her and just see what happens? And I'm completely rational in understanding that these are just images rising out of my subconscious. But why this image and not another image, And so the next time I saw her, I thought I was going to ask something, but instead I just started crying, and I said, oh, Mom, I fucked everything up. I'm so sorry, Mom. I fucked everything up. And in my mind, this woman just touched my face and said, oh, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. Everything is happening exactly the way it's supposed to. And then that stayed with me for a long time because I didn't know what it meant. And if things were happening the way they were supposed to, I didn't quite understand what I was doing then and what my role was. Then 2020 happened, as it did everywhere, and Los Angeles got even crazier than usual. And I moved my daughter and I to Austin so that we would be close to family, because I wanted her around cousins. And I walked away from a lot of stuff in my industry. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to walk back in. But I knew that she was the priority, and that we needed to be closer to the family that I had walked away from. And then I was living my life. I was fairly happy. I'm out with my best friend, and we're having a good time. And he says, hey, we got to go drop by this dinner party. And I was like, what? No, we don't. And he was like, yeah, I told our friend I just said we'd stop by. And I was like, but we're having a great time. We're the life of the party. I don't want to go to a dinner party. And he goes, no, they're done with dinner. We're just going to run in. We'll have a drink, say hi, and then we'll come back out. I was like, okay. And so we go to the house and walk in. I say hi to some people, and I go to the kitchen to make a drink. And I see Suzanne, and I'm introduced to Suzanne. And I said, hey, I'm Nick. And she goes, hi, I'm Suzanne. And we shook hands. And then we sat there shaking hands for like 10 seconds in silence, just staring into each other's eyes, while people in the kitchen were like, what's going on here? What is this? And I think she had just like made some speech to everybody about how she hadn't seen anybody in a good while, and she wasn't going to even consider dating or going on a date or anything for 9 months because she had to do this and had to do that. But I found out about that later. And then I talked to her a bit while people were just, hanging out and talking. And I never hit on women, but the Holy Spirit compelled me or something, because like a lifetime of accumulated knowledge about talking to women came out, and we're making each other laugh. And I'm like, oh, you're a musician? Let me see your hand. Oh, you don't have much callus. And oh, you should let me read your palm. And I don't know how to read palms. I'm just like, whatever. And it's funny too, because in my meditations over the month prior, I had started getting these images of some Stevie Nicks like rocker woman. And I was like, what is this? And it kept coming back to me. And so I started listening to Stevie Nicks, who I'd never listened to. And I would get kind of choked up listening to Stevie Nicks, which didn't even make sense because I had no connection to Stevie Nicks. And I never, dated somebody who was into Stevie Nicks or something. But I didn't feel in control of myself from the moment I met Suzanne, and for months afterwards. I mean, you asked me what happened the night we met. I'm still trying to figure that out. But when we shook hands, something happened that we both recognized right away. It was like a bell had rung on some higher mathematical plane. And Susan's a beautiful woman, but my first attraction to her and my constant attraction to her is a spiritual attraction. I know that's what we encountered when we first shook hands and talked to each other a lot that night. And she was so funny, and we're both being really charming and But she was going to leave. It was like around midnight or something, and she was telling people bye. And I saw that, and I walked over. And I was like, "What are you doing? You're leaving?" She's like, "I have to go." And I was like, "Why do you have to go?" She goes, "Because it's late." And I was like, "Well, okay. Well, don't you think we should do something about this?" And she said, "What?" And I said, "What do you mean, what? This? What do you think we should do about this?" And she's like, I don't know. I don't know. And I said, well, why don't you just take a walk with me? Let's just take a walk. Let's just take a walk, and then you go home. We'll just talk about it. And so we went on a walk, and we started holding hands right away, and ended up kissing, and spent the whole first night together, just talking. All PG rated. Um, but we would spend like 10 minutes staring into each other's eyes in silence, and it was like one of the most intense and intimate things I'd ever done. And after that, I didn't see her the next day, but we went on our first date the day after, and we're just like together as much as possible ever since. And one of the things that happened when I met Suzanne was I realized how lonely I had been my whole life. Like, you know, I knew I had a tendency to feel apart from others, and I had great friends and friends that would lie down in traffic for me. But until I had her, I was always alone, and it didn't matter if I was in a relationship or surrounded by friends or what. And I didn't realize how lonely I had been my whole life till I met her, and she has a version of that. And you know, our first days together, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was happening to us, because I'm 45 here, and I'm a cynical man of the world, and and I'm like, yeah, this is the craziest thing that's ever. I said, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me, and this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me, and I've done some cool stuff. And she was like, me too, and blah, 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 and but I mean, I think we were saying I love you like 3 days in, and just couldn't not be around each other. And at this point, we've been married longer than we dated. And it was a moment in my life where I felt God very powerfully. I felt him in this third thing between us, because there's me and there's Suzanne, and then there's this third thing between us. And whatever it was when we first shook hands, whatever immediately ignited between us was not something we created. It was something we were being invited to participate in. And I think we answered it with courage and with honor, but we didn't create it. It was a love that we're allowed to participate in if we take care of it. And I still feel God in the sense of the Holy Spirit the most clearly when I'm with Suzanne. I feel it in my children. I feel it in nature. I feel it in all sorts of ways, but it doesn't feel as palpable and as powerful and as other as the sense I have when I'm with Suzanne of God between us. And she was the big happy ending to a lot of very, very hard years for me. And more than anything else in my life, there's my life before Suzanne and my life after Suzanne. Like she was the fork in the road, and the thing I had been waiting for my whole life that would let my heart fully open and raise me up. I mean, you know, in our relationship, it takes work. You know, we have this indestructible, abiding love, but we're both two hot-headed Italians. You know, we fight. But something I've said about this relationship was that this relationship has never taken me anywhere I wasn't supposed to be. And being with Suzanne has led me back to myself and pushes me closer and closer to my best self. And that's her effect on me, and it's the effect of the third thing between us. But it was the great love that that I did not think existed for me. I'm just, I'm too lots of adjectives for that sort of thing to happen to me. And things I thought I was too broken for, and things I just thought I wouldn't get to experience. For instance, whenever I heard somebody say, "Oh, my husband's my best friend," or "My wife's my best friend," it would always like low key piss me off, because I would be like, "No, you're not. Your best friend's Josh. She's not your best friend. Give me a fucking break." But then I've been lucky in this relationship that she is my best friend. She's the best friend I've ever had, and nobody and nothing in my life has loved me like Suzanne, and it's such a gift. If I start talking about my wife too much, I feel like I'm bragging, but you guys know her, you know what I'm talking about. And it was like after 45 years of being very deprived in terms of affection and love, I hit this mother lode and have been avalanched by the love of this beautiful creature. And I still my favorite thing is to just hang out with Suzanne. I don't care what we're doing. It's a blast, and we have a great time, and it seems to be evergreen.
It's like in your vision meditating, it all happened exactly as it's supposed to, right?
Yeah, that's sort of been my takeaway, and things happen all the time in my life that, it's sort of like what you were talking about, Tim, and I find your story so heroic and moving. But there are times when I can see I'm part of a larger design, and I cannot possibly fathom the shape or nature of that design, but I feel myself in it, and I feel myself as a child of God, and that came to me two different ways. It came to me when I was broken, and it came to me when I met Suzanne, and that was the start of me becoming whole. I mean, really, I could talk about Suzanne for 2 hours. It's more interesting to me than True Detective.